Hi there, and welcome to The Wrap, simple news updates for busy people. Brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and explain.coza. Now, here is a really cool quote. You may have lost interest in the pandemic, it has not lost interest in you. That quote is courtesy of the Economist magazine this week. The consensus is that the virus is just getting started across large swaths of the globe. We do well to pay attention as South Africans. In today's edition, we explain how Gauteng is peaking sooner than expected. Plus, we show how a world map in the New York Times shows that the number of new cases is growing faster than ever worldwide and ebbing slowly in just a tiny number of countries that were hard hit earlier on. We also bring you other news you need to know, like more grades going back to school, plus our usual international roundup. So, let's dive in. Lockdown 2.0 for Gauteng. Gauteng's 15 million citizens could once again go into hard lockdown if the country's top body on the pandemic, the NCCC, decides so. Gauteng Health MEC Bandile Masuku has asked the National Coronavirus Command Council, which is what that previous acronym stands for, to implement an intermittent hard lockdown as Gauteng cases spiral. The country's most populous province and major business hub has reported a total of nearly 60,000 cases and over 280 deaths. And things are accelerating, with an average daily increase of nearly 4,000 just this week. Gauteng could soon overtake the Western Cape as the epicenter of the virus in South Africa, and it's heading towards its peak at least 1 month earlier than expected, according to experts. Now, the numbers have been on a steep incline ever since the hard lockdown was lifted in Gauteng and elsewhere, and restrictions were eased to allow more businesses to open in June. But the flip side is that hospitals are now filling up faster than anticipated, and there is a concern that there may not be enough beds and resources to save those in need. Currently, Gauteng has just about 8,000 beds across public and private sector hospitals. The government says it has plans to create 1,500 more emergency beds in Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, the Anglo Gold Ashanti Hospital, and the Dr. George Mukari Hospital cluster. Now, you'll remember there's also temporary hospitals that have been set up, like the Nasrec Isolation and Field Hospital facility in Johannesburg, but that's already starting to fill up, according to the Daily Maverick. Now, the problem with these facilities, the temporary ones, is that many of the beds do not have piped oxygen capability. So, very sick patients will still need to go to another hospital. Now, doctors on the ground are also voicing concerns about the lack of oxygen supplies and other essentials. So does this mean that if you live in Gauteng, you're going to have to go back under hard lockdown? Not necessarily. The National Command Council has not made a decision on it, but the chances that they will allow a hard lockdown again seem kind of slim. President Cyril Ramaphosa himself said in a briefing that there are no plans to impose a level 4 or level 5 national lockdown, and that legal cases against the lockdown regulations are also making things harder. But if Masuku's case proves strong, we could possibly see shops closing again. We've got more on that story in a link below this podcast. And other news from this week. Back to school for more learners. It's official. If your kids are in grade R, 6 and 11, it may be time to bring out the uniform, shine their shoes, pack their bags, and get the lunchboxes and masks ready, because it's back to school for them tomorrow. Unless the minister decides on a last-minute reversal like the last time. You'll never know. But schools are meant to be reopening, even though numerous school unions and organizations are opposing this. That's because since schools opened in June, over 900 schools have had to close down thanks to outbreaks that have reportedly left scores of students and teachers infected. But the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, one of several recognized voluntary associations of school governing bodies, they believe that it's safer for children to actually go back to school. Now, the Minister of Basic Education held a briefing today to discuss the preparedness of schools, so it kind of looks like it's going ahead. If you're still not convinced about your child's return to school, remember that sending them back is still completely voluntary. Of course, this means that you're going to have to homeschool them and make sure that your kids are being educated. If you're thinking of going this route, we have a 101 on what you need to know to get started in homeschooling. Again, that link is below this podcast. Although, bear in mind that even superstar Charlize Theron, our homegirl made good in Hollywood, she's famed for doing many of her own stunts, but she said she finds homeschooling her 2 children, I quote, incredibly stressful. She said in a recent interview, "I will make any action movie over and over and over again before I homeschool again." That is hilarious. Now, Every year, the country's Auditor General checks out the finances of the country's municipalities. These include the 8 metros, South Africa's major cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, where you're probably likely to live. And every year we get fresh bad news about the state of local government in this country. Now, the report for 2019 released this past week was, I hate to break this to you, worse than usual. It looked at 257 municipalities and 21 municipal entities. Now, irregular expenditure exceeded 32 billion rand in the last year, up from 24 billion in the previous year. Plus, only 20 out of those 257 municipalities received a totally clean audit. A further 91 achieved one level down from that, unqualified with findings. Unqualified in this instance is a good thing. The rest were pretty dire in auditing speak. I won't get into all the details, but here are some interesting takeaways. The Western Cape is often the star performer in these audits. 13 of the 20 clean municipalities were from this province. Now, of course, you're probably thinking to yourself that the Western Cape is the only province in South Africa controlled by the opposition DA and not the long-governing ANC. Now, of course, this is correct. The credit here is due to the technocrats under the DA government who are focusing on getting clean audits, but also to the political will that this leadership has shown to make this a priority. Now, bear in mind, this isn't universally true across the province, but the province is performing better than any other province. Why is this? Now, from a political point of view, the DA's historical strategy has been to showcase its governance in the areas it wins. That was always the DA's platform and where it was going to get more votes when it was running on a proper strategy and not being lost in murky infighting, as has recently been the case within the party. But this shows the ongoing fruit of the party's early strategy. This means that the party really should consider returning to these basics and stop all the infighting that spills out into the public and really just turns voters off. Another thing that came out of the municipal report is that municipalities that get it right are those with leaders working closely together across different levels towards the goal of a clean audit, and who pay attention to their financials throughout the year, not as a token annual exercise where expensive consultants are brought in. Moving on to other news, Zondo Commission resumes with a bang. Remember the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture? It resumed hearings this week, and South Africa's passenger rail agency, PRASA, was in the spotlight. The inquiry has started probing links between former PRASA CEO Lucky Montana's property deals from 2013 to 2016 and the suspicious takeover by a company called Precise Trade and Invest. Now, Precise turned out to be a shelf company owned by lawyer Rian van der Walt, who is also, wait for it, Montana's lawyer. Van der Walt allegedly used the cash to pay off 2 highly valued properties on behalf of Montana. The police and the Hawks have been investigating cases relating to some of Montana's property dealings from as early as 2015, but there's been no arrest yet. Now, some refresher on the inquiry, because you're going to keep hearing these little bits and tidbits of details for the next however many months, and often it's not in much context, so we're going to give you about that context now. The inquiry was launched by President Cyril Ramaphosa as recommended by former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela in response to the crazy level of corruption that happened under former President Jacob Zuma and his dodgy business buddies, the Gupta family. Elected allegations leveled at a bunch of state-owned entities like Transnet, SAA, Denel, SABC, and of course, Eskom. This level of corruption is referred to as state capture, a term you're now familiar with. What this means is when the very people at the top are in cahoots with crooks and awarding them contracts directly. It's not like your normal small and yana corruption at the bottom with officials taking their cut from contracts. This is wholesale corruption. Now, the inquiry kicked off in August 2018, so it's been a while, nearly 2 years. It doesn't have prosecuting powers, but it's collecting bucket loads of evidence that the National Prosecuting Authority will use when it's finally rebuilt itself, after also suffering the effects of the wasted years under Jacob Zuma. As we always say here on The Wrap, don't lose hope. Justice takes time. After all, look at the VVS arrest last month. Next up, Cape Town evictions, another spectacle. You may have seen a video this week showing the City of Cape Town's anti-land invasion unit and Metro Police dragging Khayelitsha resident Bulelani Nqorani out of his shack naked. Olani was beaten and his shack was torn down by the officers. The video went viral and sparked a march to the Harare police station in Khayelitsha to protest the action. The officers involved have since been suspended. But the incident has once again raised questions about police brutality and ill treatment of the poor in South Africa. Plus, ongoing anti-poor action by the city of Cape Town. That's right, also governed by the DA. Now, Xolani returned to the shack, which was rebuilt by his neighbours in a really touching scene, and has opened a case against the city. Next up, GDP contracts for third consecutive quarter. At least we knew it was coming. South Africa's gross domestic product, otherwise known as GDP, for the first 3 months of the year contracted by 2%. We got this data this week, so that refers to January to March. This is the third consecutive contraction. We've had one in the previous quarter and the previous quarter. So since June, we've been contracting quarter on quarter. South Africa reported GDP contractions of 1.4% and 0.8% in the last 2 quarters of 2019, respectively. Thus, we're in a technical recession and it's just getting deeper. This recent data does not fully reflect the impact of the lockdown, as that was called on March 27th. The next GDP data will properly reflect the impact of the lockdown on South Africa's businesses and economy. Old Mutual appoints permanent CEO, finally. Old Mutual finally appointed Ian Williamson as the company's CEO after winning a tiresome battle against its ex-CEO, Peter Moyo. Moyo was dismissed in June last year over a breakdown in trust and an alleged conflict of interest due to his links to investment holding company NMT Capital. Now, Moyo put up a huge fight to keep his position as a CEO, and Old Mutual did not back down either. The company's shares took a bit of a knock at the time, and there was an endless court case, but it's finally happened. Williamson was appointed as interim CEO amid the court battles, and it's now official. He's in, and Moyo is, funnily enough, missing in action, which is very unlike the man who's always been very vocal on this issue. Last up on your local news briefs, South Africa mourns veteran actress Mary Twala. Known for her roles in Serafina, SOS, Movango, and others, 80-year-old veteran actress Mary Twala and mother of South African television personality Somizi Mhlongo passed away on Saturday. Twala was widely praised for her acting career, which spanned over 60 years. She was nominated for an Africa Movie Academy Award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role in 2011, and she also received the Order of Ikamanga from President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2019 for her contribution to the performing arts. Rest in peace, Mama. Now we move on to your international roundup. When will governments learn that an iron fist only gets you so far? There are 2 examples this week of authoritarian governments forcing irrational and harmful rules on their citizens. I'm going to unpack 2 of those for you. Mainland China versus Hong Kong. We've spoken before about China imposing a draconian new national security law on Hong Kong. Well, they've already made their first arrest under this law. Now, a quick history lesson here. Hong Kong was handed back to China in 1997 after 156 years of being a United Kingdom colony. Under the agreement, Hong Kong would follow a 2 systems, 1 country policy that would allow Hong Kong to pursue a more capitalist and democratic model than China's communism. Hong Kong subsequently saw incredible economic growth and has one of the highest per capita incomes in the world. It was supposed to enjoy this relative independence until 2046, according to the agreement between China and the UK. But China got pretty impatient after those Hong Kong student-led pro-democracy protests that rocked the world from 2014. Remember how amazed we all were at how highly disciplined and brave the sitting protesters were? But now, such protests are illegal and Hong Kongers can be jailed for life for vaguely defined crimes such as subversion or conspiring with anyone abroad to provoke hatred of the communist regime. It's a real pity. Now, Britain's Boris Johnson and his usually immigrant-resistant government has offered all Hong Kongers born in the country while it was still a British colony to live and work in the United Kingdom under very generous conditions. Australia may join them with an offer of its own, partly because Hong Kongers are seen as the right kind of migrants by those conservative governments, hardworking, industrious, studious. As The Economist puts it, Hong Kongers are unlikely to compete for fish-packing jobs in Grimsby. Another example of an authoritarian government just forcing an iron fist down its citizens' throats is our neighboring country of Zimbabwe. Cry the beloved neighboring country. So, many were cautiously optimistic when dictator Robert Mugabe was overthrown by the country's military in 2017, and his successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa, promised that Zimbabwe would have free elections and be open to business. It all sounded great. Well, so much for that. As the Financial Times noted, Mnangagwa's government has returned to international pariah status because of repeated abuses by security forces and corruption scandals that have shut off its access to financing. And so, Zimbabwe's long-suffering citizens have had to endure yet another prolonged hyperinflation crisis. The authorities meddled with the country's currency so much that the cash in their wallets lost real value. Faced with a Zimbabwean dollar worth a fraction of what the government claims it is and a shortage of foreign currency, mobile money transactions in Zimbabwe have absolutely exploded. Rightfully so, right? But in repressive regimes, innovation suffers, especially when it shows up the system. So the system reacts by trying to shut it down. Now authorities have suspended most mobile money transactions, claiming a conspiracy to undermine the country's currency. But there's no conspiracy, guys. You did this all on your own with your ridiculous monetary policy, or lack thereof. Now, authorities also suspended trading on the stock exchange, where traders have been observing share prices to estimate how much the currency is really worth. When people are desperate, they will turn to whatever measures they need to actually make a living and put bread in their mouth. Now, government is trying to stop this with heavy-handed tactics, but the people will find a way. If you're a South African, you probably know a Zimbabwean living in our country sending money home to their loved ones. It's a very typical thing for the Zimbabweans living abroad. This new suspension of mobile money makes that much harder. On to some other international briefs. US rapper Kanye West has announced he's running for US president again. But one never knows whether to take Ye seriously. He cozied up to US President Donald Trump for a while before a very public turn as a born-again Christian, and now this announcement. Speaking of Trump, his re-election for a second term as president seemed likely before the pandemic. Now, not so much. His rival in the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, is leading predictions. Now, Biden was Barack Obama's former deputy, you'll remember. As The Economist puts it, the virus has demonstrated something definitively to a large number of persuadable American voters, that Mr. Trump is just not that good at being a president. Still, it's a long time till the November elections, and Trump might pull ahead in the race again. In other American news, Mississippi, one of the US states, legislature voted to remove the Confederate battle flag, which references the country's ugly slave history and civil war, from their state flag. It only took them till 2020. It's the last US state to do so. In Europe, the European Union has reopened its borders to residents from 14 countries where the virus is under control, such as Canada and New Zealand. Are we going to see a whole separate world order where countries that are doing a good job of this get to hang out and the rest of us don't get to go on holiday? That would be terrible. And last up from your international briefs, our homeboy Elon Musk's electric car company Tesla has overtaken Toyota to become the world's biggest car maker by market capitalization. That's pretty huge. Now, market capitalization, that just means what the company is valued at, not what it actually makes. After all, Tesla has yet to turn an annual profit. So, that's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends and family to go to explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from us.